Today, we honor the life of Jeff Aldrich, a pioneering chemical ecologist whose remarkable contributions to science, unwavering commitment to scientific integrity, and the dedicated service to the International Society of Chemical Ecology and the Journal of Chemical Ecology have left an enduring legacy. His sharp sense of humor, generous friendship, and inspired mentorship touched countless lives and created lasting impact in the fields of entomology and chemical ecology. His passing leaves a profound void in our hearts and the scientific community. We will start with Jeff's educational journey shared in his own words.
It all started in Columbia, Missouri, where I went to high school. And my father was the dean of agricultural research, so I realized later in my life that he pulled a lot of strings for me. I managed to get a bachelor's degree without ever having a course in entomology. After I graduated, my girlfriend and I I got accepted number one in my class of agriculture, which opened a lot of doors. I had good grades, so I got a full scholarship at Oregon State in oceanography. And so we moved to Corvallis, and I lasted one semester. So I went back to Missouri, and I dove into entomology with Tom Yankee. I got a master's degree. I was sort of out of sync. I applied to Harvard and University of Georgia, and I ended up going to Georgia. So I lived in Athens, Georgia, and I rented this little house, $75 a month. I lived there for 4 years. Made a lot of friends in Georgia. They call this the big house. I lived here by myself. And I worked with Murray Blum, who was one of the icons in chemical ecology in the early days. And he taught me a lot about chemical ecology for my PhD, and he made it fun. They gave me a doctor PhD in '77. Murray was nice to me. So I went to New York State Agriculture Experiment Station, which was Cornell University's experiment station, and that was up in Geneva. And I worked with Bill Bowers out for 2 years.
In Bill's lab, Jeff was assigned to address whether precocinus act directly on the corpora lata to eliminate juvenile hormone, or indirectly via the neuronal connection to the corpora lata to shut it off. Jeff's research established that the precocinus act directly on the corpora lata to stop production of juvenile hormone 3. According to Jeff, he wrote the manuscript, submitted to Bill Bowers for comments, and when the comments came back, there was only one editorial suggestion: reverse the order of the authors, with Bill Bowers becoming first author. We do not know Bill Bowers' version of this story, but we do know that he was a towering figure in chemical ecology. It was in Geneva that Jeff met Tom Baker, another icon in chemical ecology. Tom, what did you remember most about Jeff?
Hi, Walter. Yeah, I think the thing I remember most about Jeff Aldrich was how gung-ho a personality he had and how enthusiastic he was about everything. I remember him showing me his microdissections in Geneva when we were both there in the early 1970s, and how devoted he was to this technique. And over the years, we ran into each other at meetings and had a great time. And it was so much fun with Jeff. And in the late, maybe around 2017, 2018, my wife Julie and I visited him in Santa Cruz, and he had set up in his little apartment a whole battery of Koread bug rearing trays that he lovingly took care of because he was trying to identify a new pheromone of the Koreads even in that period. I remember back in Geneva how gung-ho he was in playing softball on Wendell Roloff's softball team with me. And he was a great center fielder and just went full bore on chasing fly balls and diving into the ground. And just an enthusiastic, wonderful, fun guy.
Jeff had fun in Geneva. Here is what happened next.
I got my first job and my only job. This was the Beltsville Agriculture Experiment Station. So that's a USDA lab, and the agency is called ARS, Agricultural Research Service. And so I spent 31 years living in the suburbs of Washington, D.C.
I have asked ChatGPT who is the most prominent entomologist studying stink bug.
When it comes to stink bugs, Pentatomity, especially the invasive brown marmorated stink bug, Haliomorpha elise, the most prominent researcher is Jeffrey R. Aldrich. A USDA-ARS entomologist and chemical ecologist based in Beltsville, Maryland, Aldrich is a leading expert on stink bug behavior and pest control. He developed pheromone-based traps and monitoring systems aimed at managing stink bug populations in staple crops like cotton, corn, and soybeans. His approach leverages the bug's own chemical signals for effective control. He's frequently cited by universities and cooperative extension services, particularly in agriculture-heavy regions like California, for his expertise in managing Haliomorpha elise and related species.
Jeff trained many domestic and international students, including Josué Santana.
And I had Josué was on a sandwich program, came up to DC and was in my lab for a year or so doing his PhD. Through the sandwich program, they allowed him to do their PhD research in foreign labs.
Yes, that's it, Jeff. We had a great time together in Beltsville in 1995-96. Well, my name is Josué Santana. I'm professor at Federal University of Rio Grande do Sul in Brazil. I will never forget the first day in your lab, Jeff. You welcomed me with a warm smile and said in Portuguese, "Bem-vindo, Josué." Welcome, Josué. Jeff used to say some words in Portuguese in a fun way sometimes. Then he played a Caetano Veloso record. It was amazing for me. Yes, Jeff had a turntable in his lab with several Brazilian singers. And then we start working. That kind and attentive gesture was the beginning of a very respectful and cordial relationship between us. Jeff was a very, very important person in my life. He taught me so much about chemical ecology, and he will always remain in my fondest memories. I'll miss you, Jeff. Rest in peace, dear.
Jeff's connection with Brazil started with Miguel Borges. Jeff explains.
Miguel Borges, he was the guy that went through and recognized who I was from a proposal I wrote.
That is true. I knew Jeffrey Aldrich first through his publications. At that time, beginning of the 1990s, or before, a little bit before that, during my PhD, I used to mention a lot the work of Jeffrey Aldrich because we were working the same subject, Nesaria virida. The pentatomid was very important at that time in Brazil. After that, coming back to Brazil, I saw a proposal of Aldrich calling for collaboration projects was a small project, just pocket money to go and visit each other. And then we organized, and Jeffrey Aldrich was the first one to come to Brazil at that collaboration. And seems to me that he was fascinated with Brazil. He had no idea what he could find here. And we started work on that with the same subject. And he helped me a lot in the laboratory. He changed my GC, that was at that time a variant with packet column. We managed to change that for capillary column. And then we start to work with some other pentatomids, and we stay almost 30 years together in times it goes and come back, and through publications. And I would like to thank Jeff Aldrich very much. He helped me a lot. He traveled to all Brazil and helped a lot, some other scientists as well. It's difficult to remember him now. I miss him a lot. Thank you very much, Jeffrey Aldrich.
That's how Jeff became fluent in Portuguese.
He gave presentations at conferences in Brazil in Portuguese. He liked to start by saying, "Eu estudo fedor," which means I study stink. The story goes that at one conference, he had a dyslexic moment, switching the O and E in the word fedor, and ended up saying, "Eu estudo fude," which means I study the F word. Needless to say, the audience enjoyed his presentation.
He was a visiting scholar in Paulo Zarbin's lab in Paraná, Brazil.
One of the many unforgettable moments I had with Jeff that happened in 2013 during the 8th Brazilian meeting on chemical ecology. That year I had the great honor of receiving the Brazilian award in chemical ecology. And Jeff was attending that meeting, and the organizer, almost at the last minute, asked him to present the award to me, along with a short speech about my work, about me. And he did it. And he did it in Portuguese. And that was really a great moment, because seeing Jeff, someone that I really deeply admire, both as a scientific and as a friend, standing there in the speaking in my language, make that moment even more special. I will never forget it, really. And that kind of generosity and enthusiasm, it was so typical from Jeff.
Jeff liked to tell jokes. He repeated them so many times that once I told him that he looks like CNN headline news. I'm not sure how to describe Jeff's type of humor, so I asked Kobichal, one of his many friends and admirers.
First and foremost, Jeff was a dear friend. He was a constant presence at entomology and chemical ecology conferences around the globe. Jeff had a special way of infusing fun and wry humor into what could otherwise be long and very dry scientific events. He was always ready to cap off a day of scientific presentations with a beer, 2 or maybe more, and some of the corniest jokes I've ever heard. Jeff was also a highly accomplished scientist. He worked on a wide range of insects, but he spent much of his career studying the chemical ecology of hemipterans, especially stink bugs and later lacewings. For many years, I appreciated Jeff's contributions, but from afar, without fully grasping the depth of his impact. But about 15 years ago, I began working on bed bugs, which are also hemipterans, and I started reading Jeff's papers more closely and more deeply. That's when I truly came to recognize the novelty of Jeff's findings and the enormous contributions he made to our understanding of hemipteran defensive secretions, aggregation pheromones, sex pheromones, not only of hemipterans, but of insects in general.
Kammerschlager has good memories of conversation with Jeff over a beer or two.
I first met Jeff at an ISCE meeting decades ago. He was one of the most outgoing individuals in chemical ecology that I knew. And we would meet up from time to time at meetings over some alcoholic beverage just to spin yarns to each other. He spent most of his time at the ARS in Beltsville. He focused on true bugs and was responsible or involved in the identification of the pheromones of several of these. Although he retired early from Beltsville, he maintained an interest in chemical ecology, and appropriately, he had a website called Bugman Consulting Service. I carry very fond memories of Jeff.
Displayed on the left is Euschistus conspersus, one of the stink bugs that Jeff studied. As we celebrate Jeff's life and legacy, taxonomists just identified a new species of stink bug, which they named Neogeoffreya aldrichi. They placed it into a new genus, given various unique features, including that the rostrum is facing up and resembles Jeff's smiling face. Apparently, it does not have a sex pheromone as it relies on vision to find food, alcohol, and fedor.
Another Brazilian collaborator is Antonio Panizzi, who shared some anecdotes.
I was very sad to learn about the news that Jeff Aldrich had passed away, and I have very good memories of Jeff. We met several times in Brazil and the US, and one of the latest time he came to visit my lab in Londrina, Paraná, to collect some bugs that were pesting the cherry tomatoes in California, and he was looking for natural enemies. Then we were to go to the field, and then when he came out, he was dressed up like going to a safari. I said, Jeff, we just go outside to get some bugs. You don't need to be dressed like that. But anyway, we went and collected the bugs, and it was a very productive day. We found some natural enemies, and I remember very well that day. It was very fun and very, very good. And later on, we met several times in the United States at the Entomological Society of America meetings, as well as in the USDA when I passed sometimes as a visiting scientist at the Peoria lab in Illinois. And he came down one time, and we visited and talked. So I have very good memories of Jeff, and I really regret to learn that he had passed away, and he will be missed very much among all of his friends.
Jeff had international collaborations in Italy. Here is Stefano Colazza.
I had the opportunity to meet Jeff early in my career, and it was because of him, his divided experience, that it took me my first steps in the chemical ecology of stink bug and their natural enemies. Jeff has always been very close to Italy, and we had some good time together both in Perugia and Palermo, as well as I spent a very nice period working for a few months in Beltsville in his lab. Now, however, I cannot find much more to say than a deep emptiness around me. So, Jeff, I miss you so much.
One of the many trips to Italy was to Florence to attend the International Congress of Entomology. Sunny Ramaswamy shares some memories of that trip.
I have known Jeff Aldrich since the 1970s, in part because of our common interest in sex pheromones and other semiochemicals. Over the years, we saw each other during the annual entomology meetings, even partaking a beer or two. Jeff was an excellent scientist, but importantly, a fun-loving, wild and crazy guy with a quick smile and a passion for life. Two events in my experience speak to this. The first was in 1988, during the International Congress in Vancouver, British Columbia. We're on the campus of the University of British Columbia, which we discovered had a nude beach. Many of us entomologists made our way down to the beach. Of course, none of us was in our birthday suit. As we're gawking, here comes a guy with a Panama cap, with collection vials on the cap, his butterfly net, and his willy swinging back and forth. It was classic Jeff. Needless to say, we were not surprised. The second event was in 1996 during the International Congress in Florence, Italy. Jeff, Walter Leal, and I ended up taking a train to Rome. On the trip down on the train, a couple of beautiful Italian women were in the car with us. Jeff, with his quick smile and American drawl, was a big hit, and they were all over him. And indeed, one of them said she felt like she had to have Coke and popcorn, the epitome of America. For everyone who interacted with Jeff, he was the epitome of a fun-loving and sharp man. Jeff will be missed. Rest in peace, my friend.
Jeff's postdoc and the lab members became collaborators and friends after they left the lab. Here is King He Zhang.
I did my postdoc with Jeff from 2002 to 2003. So back in then, I was supposed to identify the sex pheromone for the eastern licus bug. So instead, to our big surprise, and we discovered the first pheromone for the order Neuroptera, and from a lysine called Chrysopa oculata. So Jeff was so happy and excited about our unexpected findings, of course. And the next time, Jeff introduced me to his best industry friends, Rod Schreitmiller, the president and founder of Sterling International, and the company that commercialized Jeff's spine bug pheromone for the consumer market. So with Jeff's strong recommendation, I became the R&D director at Sterling International right after my postdoc study. Over the past 20 plus years. So even after Jeff's retirement from the USDA, and James and I worked together on so many projects, and we published more than 20 papers together, and including one review paper in the annual review of entomology on the chemical ecology of Neuroptera. So Jeff was not only a mentor to me, but also a very dear friend. And I'm going to miss him very much.
Ashot Krimian was first a visiting scientist in Jeff's team at the USDA ARS in Beltsville.
I met Jeff Aldrich in 1991 when I came from Armenia to U.S. Department of Agriculture to continue my research as a visiting scientist. So from the first appearance, Jeff was epitome to me as a true American, good-looking, tall, fun person. But behind that appearance, I soon discovered a good scientist, devoted to his friends, but most importantly to his chemical ecology, science of chemical ecology. There's a saying that true scientists consider their job as a long life pursuit or calling rather than just a work, which retirement of Jeff in 1913, I believe, confirmed that. So indeed, right after retirement, he continued working at UC Davis, and he opened his own company, small company after that, to continue working on chemical ecology. So in my memory, the best cooperative effort that we made with Jeff, at least from my perspective, was identification of the pheromone of brown marmorated stingbug, which comprises two stereoisomers of epoxy bisabolinol. And Jeff was inspiration, who actually made me feel inspired of synthesizing all stereoisomers eventually found two that produced by nature. Jeff also put together a group of entomologists from Beltsville and Kernersville to organize field work. When I go back in my memory, and I always remember Jeff as a fit person, fun-loving, devoted to friends, and very sporty and ambitious in sport as well. So it's hard to believe that this illness could take him down, which eventually happened, unfortunately, not too long ago. So in conclusion, I only can say rest in peace, my friend.
After Jeff retired from the USDA, he got an adjunct appointment at UC Davis. Jeff recounts how the relationship with Frank Zeylon started.
Frank contacted me after probably reading some of my papers, and he got his then student, Mike Hoffman, to call me up and ask me if I wanted to collaborate trying to identify the pheromone of Euschistus conspersus, which is a big pest out on the West Coast. It still is.
Well, that story is absolutely true. Mike Hoffman was a student here at UC Davis before he went to Cornell, and we were working on Conspur stink bug, which was a big pest of processing tomatoes. And we approached Jeff with working on developing a pheromone for it. And Jeff did identify the pheromone for Conspur stink bug, and it was ultimately patented, and we're on the patent for the Conspur stink bug. Jeff helped us a lot also in developing the trap for Conspur stink bug, which was a double cone trap, and it became commercially used by pest control advisors here in California. It's kind of ironic that 20 years later, Jeff was retiring, and he called me and said he was moving to California and would like to continue his chemical ecology work, and was wondering if he could work here on campus. And we were able to get him an appointment as an associate in the Agricultural Experiment Station. He worked in my lab and worked really closely with a number of my international scholars.
One of these international scholars is Elda Vitanovic, who spoke to us via phone.
I met Dr. Aldrich in 2015 during my stay in Dr. Zalom's lab at UC Davis. Since then, our collaboration has only grown. His knowledge, enthusiasm, and desire to pass it on have been very important to my career and shaped me. I will remember him as someone who was a very simple, funny, and full of optimism and goodwill. Also, I will never forget his Christmas visit. When he was on his way to his family to celebrate Christmas together, he stopped to the lab at UC Davis and brought me a homemade American pie as a gift. I still remember the smell and the taste of that pie, and his caring touched me so much. At that moment, for me, who was in a foreign country, meant a lot to me. I'm sorry that he is not longer with us, but I will always remember his spirit and our friendship. Jeff, thank you so much for everything you were and did. Rest in peace.
Alvin He and Baldwin Torto shared memories of Jeff.
Jeffrey Aldrich is a guy who lived life to the fullest. I first met him in Shanghai, China. I think it was in 1999 for the Asia Pacific Chemical Ecology Association first meeting. I wanted to ask him whether he was related to Sigmund Aldrich, because he had that famous surname, Jeff Aldrich. But anyway, we met every time we go to ISCE meetings and also some FA's meetings. And the thing that struck me most was he was really down to earth, and he really had a passion for life. He always tells me his adventures and how he lived in California. He really loved the sand and the beach. So Jeff is a great guy, a guy who tells us that we must live life to the fullest.
So sad to learn about the loss of Jeff. I've known Jeff for about 30 years. He's always had a positive attitude. I'll give you an example. In 2008, he came all the way to Arusha to a small chemical ecology meeting with was to trap stink bugs. And I think he caught about 2 insects. Was he successful or not? But Jeff just felt good about it. That's Jeff. Jeff, thank you so much for making us laugh at ISCE meetings. Goodbye, buddy. You rest in peace.
Jeff's service to the International Society of Chemical Ecology and the Journal of Chemical Ecology was stellar, as Kobe Shaw recounts.
Jeff was a deeply passionate about serving the chemical ecology community, particularly through the International Society of Chemical Ecology. He served as president of the society in 2009 and 2010, and as counselor of the society for 2 3-year terms, so for a total of 6 years. Jeff also organized and participated in countless ISCE symposia. One particularly memorable contribution, at least to me, was the 2005 International Society of Chemical Ecology meeting that Jeff organized in Washington, D.C. As many of you know, it's hard enough to accomplish anything in D.C., especially these days. But Jeff pulled it off, despite the expensive venue in D.C. and an unusually brutal heat wave that we experienced, with temperatures soaring to 97 degrees Fahrenheit, over 36 degrees centigrade, with nearly 100% humidity. The meeting turned out to be a huge success. In fact, I remember visiting the National Zoo, just 15-minute walk from the conference. Every animal had taken shelters inside to escape the brutal heat. But thanks to Jeff's tireless planning, strong sponsorship from industry partners, the scientific program went off beautifully and left a lasting impression on all of us. So I will deeply miss Jeff's friendship, his quirky sense of humor, and his passion for science and service, particularly to chemical ecology. Thank you, Walter, for organizing this remembrance. We all appreciate that. Take care, everyone. Thank you.
John Romeo worked closely with Jeff in the editorial team of the Journal of Chemical Ecology. Because of traveling, he could not record a video, but shared a remark that I'll read with AI assistance.
I met Jeff sometime during the early 1990s at an ISCE meeting. Not being a member of the insect pheromone group, rather having a foundation in plant chemistry, I was brought into the society by Lincoln Brower and Gerald Rosenthal. I took to Jeff right away with his open, friendly face and manner, and he helped ease my way with the close-knit insect people. His free spirit persona always appealed to me. After I became chief editor of the Journal of Chemical Ecology, we appointed him to the editorial board in 2005 or thereabouts. Jeff was an excellent writer, as many know, but early on I was astounded by the insight and succinct language he brought to his reviews of others' work. What took many to say in lengthy discourses running to pages, Jeff could write in a paragraph or two. Always firm and critical, but fair and kind in his assessments. He didn't miss anything so far as I could determine. Never biased, never harsh, and never vindictive. You didn't have to read between the lines in his comments for editor's eyes only, but he was diplomatic in his words to the authors. He sometimes added a bit of humor to the former. When we met in person, his facial expressions said volumes in response to queries. In 2007, I asked him to help the journal as an associate editor. He did this religiously for several years, even when he was moving from place to place in his later years. He was an important part of the decision-making process on all the papers on insect communication and behavior that fell under his purview. He was especially insightful when the reviews were split, as they sometimes are. With his peripatetic wanderings, it was not always easy to track him down. I never knew where the missives might be coming from. But he always got things done. One of my fondest personal memories of Jeff took place at the 2010 ISCE meeting in Tours, France. He somehow found a group of local funsters down by the river who were drinking and dancing outside in the afternoons to a small pickup band. I think he did this 2, maybe 3 days in a row. The night of our banquet, he arrived back at the hotel, dripping in sweat and looking totally wiped out. I thought he'd never make it, but he appeared at dinner an hour later with his lady friend looking like a GQ model, white shirt, tie, suit, and fresh as if awakening from a restorative nap. The energy. Jeff sent his brilliant niece, Jenny Sneed, to do her master's degree with me. She pursued her PhD in Germany and is now a successful researcher at the Smithsonian Marine Station in Fort Pierce, Florida. My own life is richer for having known Jeff and his extended family, and I will miss him for a long time.
Like Tom Baker, the great Wendell Rudolph got to know more about Jeff while he was a postdoc with Bill Bowers in Geneva.
I have known Jeff for a long time, always with that long wavy hair and the big smile. I met him first in the 70s when he was a postdoc for Murray Blum in Georgia. But I started to know him better when he came to Cornell to work down the hall from me with Bill Bowers. Oh, we had a good time. And then he went off to the USDA in Beltsville, and we remained friends the whole time. And so I don't think I can add anything to all the good things that have already been said about him. He was a wonderful person and an excellent scientist. And so, at this time, I would like to raise my glass on behalf of all of you in this celebration of life toast for our good friend Jeff Aldrich. Toast and cheers.
To Jeff, with deep gratitude for all he gave us, his wisdom, his laughter, his mentorship, and his unwavering commitment to the advancement of science, in particular chemical ecology and entomology. His presence enriched our community, and his legacy will continue to inspire future generations. He will be deeply missed and always remembered. Thank you for watching.